Joan phoned in there. Joan is in Meath, and she just loved the Holy Mass this morning. I loved it myself, in fact, too. Ruth is such a beautiful singer indeed, and such great talent. Of course, she's been with Holy Family Mission in Glencumra with Father Patrick and the team there for a couple of years, and got great formation there, and I suppose continued it really with the house and group that she belonged to, studying theology during her Maynooth formation as well. So Joan said most beautiful she's ever heard, brought tears to her eyes. She just loved the singing. So indeed I was luxuriating in it, if that's allowed, a little bit during Mass this morning as well. It's just nice, these captivating, these little transfiguring moments, you might say. Nice to relish them and to hold on to them for the wearisomeness at times of the path ahead. So it is nice indeed. So yes, I must I'll pass that on to Ruth, certainly, and we'll try and build and grow on that a little bit. We certainly have invited her for the live on air masses to join us and to share her amazing gifts with us there as well. So very good. Thank you for sharing that. Lovely to hear from you. And do please invite you to, as always, text and email and write to us here. So the usual number is 089 467 2000 plus 353 89 467 2000 if you're in the north of Ireland or outside of the country. And indeed 014 123456. And just seeing even this morning and yesterday, all four lights flashing red on the telephone handset on my desk, meaning that all four lines, we have four lines into the studio, were all engaged and people being spoken with. It's getting kind of busy around here, so thank God for that. Lovely to see it. So impressive to see the busyness and the interaction that is continuing all the while, and for that we thank you. And it just really shows, I suppose, that we appreciate very much your interaction with us, and that you indeed are following through on that yourself as well. So thank you very much indeed. Again, the number is 014 123456 if you'd like to give us a call. Now, what was I going to chat with you? I'll give you this little passage here. Tara kindly put before me here, Pope Francis giving his own advice. Somebody actually did ask yesterday's show about how to keep the faith going, or how to keep it alive, or keep it strong. You know, any suggestions? And this is advice from Pope Francis for reigniting your spiritual life after falling out of practice. He said, if we lose the thread of the spiritual life, if 1,000 problems and thoughts assail us, let us heed the advice of St. Paul. Let us place ourselves in front of Christ crucified. Let us begin again for him. Let us take the crucifix in our hands, hold it close to our heart. Or we can even take some time in adoration before the Holy Eucharist, where Jesus is broken for us, crucified, risen. Power of God who pours out his love into our hearts. And we've seen that happen here over the last 40 days. We've had, not quite 40 just yet, on the 1st of November, we'll have finished our 40 days of continuous adoration. We have had some extraordinary visitors to the studio chapel, quietly and unassumedly, and, by invitation, come and see. And they have come and seen, and we have seen such transformations in hearts and minds and souls. It's just lovely to witness. And we're so grateful. It's just been an enormous journey, and not without its challenges, as every journey is. But it's been a real blessing to see so many people come to visit the studio and to pray before Jesus here in the Holy Eucharist. I don't know if you were listening last evening. It was lovely to have the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal from Drogheda come and sing and pray and lead us in the Rosary at 5:30 yesterday with adoration. That's on Facebook there if you'd like to scroll back and listen into that too. And we do hope that will open a little door that maybe we might have something more regular from the Franciscan Sisters in their great ministry. So watch this space, because you see, with all of these interesting initiatives, other avenues of exploration suggest themselves, and other avenues of interest and growth and so on. So it's nice to see that, when people come in, it sort of activates minds and the Holy Spirit can work and suggest little things to move forward. So that's what the Pope is saying. If you want to reignite your spiritual life, if it is you're at a low point or a low ebb, or things are somehow humdrum, or I don't know, there's a kind of a time for that in the spiritual life too. The story of Mother Teresa, actually, Saint Teresa, that for years in her life she was going through a kind of a darkness, a sort of expression of absolute faith and trust in the Lord, as if she was kind of numb to any physical sense of God's presence, a time of darkness, really. And it only came through in her writings after she died, letters, I think, actually, that she wanted destroyed, and they were put into a book afterwards. So some of these saints, it's extraordinary, the lives of sheer faith. So there's Pope Francis suggesting that for us. The crucifix, certainly to have one of those to hand and before us or alongside us, or again an image or an actual crucifix, or better still, certainly coming to the Lord in adoration. So he was speaking in the Paul VI Hall, St. Paul VI Hall. In the winter season, of course, they come indoors. It was his Chatechesis on St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. He says, today there are many who still seek religious security rather than the living and true God. That's an interesting thought too. Focusing more on rituals and precepts instead of embracing God's love with their whole being. That's a little danger, maybe a spiritual danger maybe as well, that we can fall into, a little trap we can fall into, and perhaps take too much solace, that'd be right, out of the rituals, or kind of maybe better to say, to settle for just the ritual and precepts and leave it at that. That's probably the right way of thinking of it, instead of, as he says, embracing God's love with their whole being. So yes, by all means, that we embrace the ritual and the precepts and so forth, and we take great comfort and consolation in the guidance and truth that the Church's teaching offers, but that we get up and share it with others, that it be a little bit uncomfortable too. And he says, it's interesting now, the Pope is saying, this is the temptation of the new fundamentalists, isn't it? Of those who seem to be afraid to make progress. This is a real Jesuit speaking now, the Ignatian exercises and that. There's a challenge in those. We don't just sit back and relax and, again, luxuriate all the while. I think there's moments for that, but there's also the task to make progress. And those who regress because they feel more secure. They seek the security of God and not the God of our security. So maybe we can kind of take shelter and hide away in these things a little bit too. It's a tough ask, isn't it? Because you kind of go out in the cold, bleak and windy and, inhospitable world at times, and it seems as if, again, the way we've built up our faith, it gets rattled and it gets shaken. I would say the opposite might be the case, that, again, we take the security of our faith with us in order to meet the cold and inhospitable climate at times that comes to us. So St. Paul, and it's great if Pope Francis just giving us another take on these things to really challenge us. St. Paul then asks us, he says, to return to what is essential, simply to turn to God, the God of our security. He underlined that meeting the crucified Jesus in our prayers gives us life. So, yes, again, perhaps we should allow ourselves to be discomfited by the cross and discomfited by the challenges of the teaching of Jesus. Go sell all you have, give it to the poor. That's a pretty strong teaching. The Holy Spirit flows forth from Jesus' passion, death and resurrection, so that the action of the Holy Spirit in us can change our hearts, not anything that we do. So it's not as if we bring about our own salvation. Be important. Certainly what we do disposes us to grace. I would certainly say it's very important, because how can the heart change unless there's some movement in some way, some direction of omitting or eliminating things that take us away from God and choosing then the things that draw us towards Him. So there is a sense of action on our part too, but it's really trusting in God's grace. He said we should ask ourselves that these fruits of love, of joy, of peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, does my life bear these fruits? Is there evidence of the fruits, again, in action? I think is what he's trying to teach us. And he says this teaching also has a message for the church, because sometimes people who approach the church get the impression they're dealing with a dense mass of rules and regulations. And yes, there are rules and regulations. There have to be. Every organization has such things. But he said, no, that's not what you identify as the church. The rules and the precepts and so on are there as means to guide our passage, like the rules of the road. But that's not the first thing, hopefully, that we should see when it comes to the church. Christ is whom we look to. In reality, he concludes, the beauty of faith in Jesus Christ cannot be grasped on the basis of so many commandments or of a moral vision developed in many layers, which can make us forget the original fruitfulness of love, nourished by prayer, from which peace and joyful witness flow. Yes, so again, coming back to the idea that the rules and regulations are there with a purpose in mind and so on, but when we're living in faith and a closeness to Christ, we, as it were, transcend the commandments. We transcend rules and regulations. They're there, but again, like the musician, the accomplished musician or the accomplished sportsman, you transcend these things, and the skill and the ability flows with such greater ease. And so these fruits then they're the result of the what flows then from this closeness to the Lord. So there you are. I mean, the Holy Father is doing really what we try to do here, what I try to do of a weekday morning, a little chatechesis, a bit of formation, a bit of think of things just a little different. Tune into the voice of the Holy Spirit and be guided in that way too. So very good. It's nice just to share that with you there as well. Today, the feast of St. Simon and St. Jude. We might just dip into that. St. Jude, of course, you know, the identified with Thaddeus and the brother of James, and one of the brethren of the Lord, as it is spoken. And of that is understood, you know, the wider family of Jesus. And of course, the author of the Epistle of St. Jude, very brief letter at the end of the New Testament. Little is known of his life after Pentecost, where he's mentioned there, of course, in the Acts of the Apostles. Excuse me. According to Western tradition, he joined with Simon, Saint Simon, in preaching the gospel in Persia, where both were martyrs. So that's why Simon and Jude are coupled together today for their feast day. In modern times, Jude has acquired a considerable popularity as patron of hopeless cases, whose efficacy is testified even in the personal columns of the Times. I assume that's the English Times rather than the Irish Times. I somehow doubt whether or not, but I could be wrong. That would be in the Irish Times. But certainly in the personal columns of papers, you will see thanksgiving to St. Jude. Maybe the case in the secular papers. This patronage is said to have originated because nobody invoked him for anything, since his name so closely resembled that of Judas, who betrayed the Lord. Consequently, he favours even the most desperate situations of his clients. So, kind of like the last straw. Poor Jude. Right, you know, although he probably doesn't mind. Say, I'll take the worst of situations. Hand it over. Let me work on it. There are at least 3 ancient English dedications to St. Simon and Jude, but none to either of them alone. And the relics are believed to have been translated to St. Peter's in Rome in the 7th or 8th centuries. I think that's kind of it. In art, Jude's usual emblem is a club, apparently the instrument of his death. He was clubbed to death. Ugh. These poor martyrs. Yeah, not nice to dwell on that too much. Sometimes he holds a ship, apparently, whereas St. Simon holds a fish. Let me just see what my man here says about Simon as well. I might have a few thoughts to fill in on the other side of the picture here. They go together. Yes, called either the Canaanite, he was from Canaan in Galilee, or the Zealot by the evangelists, which may have actually indicated his membership of a strict Jewish sect. There was a group of religious zealots, they were known, and I think they were kind of militant. They were pretty strong anyway in terms of certainly opposition to Roman occupation, and were the kind who would seek to take the kingdom by storm, as it were, in a kind of forceful way. As such is my understanding of the Zealots. Simon, like several other apostles, disappears from history again after Pentecost, but there are various uncertain traditions about his subsequent preaching and his martyrdom. Let me just take a quick drink, if I may. Oops, the throat is just drying up on me there. Says he, spilling water on his phone. Never a good idea. So the Roman Missal says that he first preached in Egypt, but then joined Jude, who had been in Mesopotamia, and then they went together to Persia. So that just fills out some of the geographical and historical elements there, insofar as they can be known. And they suffered martyrdom at Sufyan, or Siani is the name there. Should that be Sinai? I don't know. Excuse me. And this tradition dates from the 6th century. So yes, a boat is the usual implement or symbol that's associated with Saint Simon. Very good. So that's Simon and Jude, as much as we know about them, two apostles of the New Testament, and witnesses and martyrs to the faith as well. Excuse me. Now a little bit of a couple of events, rather. Just to mention, I was at our Legion of Mary Curia meeting. I hadn't been there for a long, long time, but went last night. And there's always something happening in the Legion of Mary. They're so active with all kinds of things, but all the time promoting the causes of Alfie Lamb and Edel Quinn and Frank Duff, which of course we pray their prayers every day on Radio Maria as well, praying that these three marvellous lay people will one day be canonized by the Church. So there's a Mass of commemoration and for the beatification of the servant of God, Alfie Lamb, coming up next Sunday at 12:15. Pity it doesn't coincide with our own Mass times here, that we could link in with it. But it's on in the Church of the Three Patrons in Rathgar here in Dublin. And Father Paul Taylor, the parish priest, will be preaching there. It'll be on web stream as well, rathgarparish.ie. And Legionaries are great to attend these great ceremonies in relation to these great saints in waiting. And we should all be trying to promote them really for the good of the Church. Alfie Lamb, of course, was born in Tullamore in County Offaly on the feast of John the Baptist on the 24th of June 1932, so the year of the Eucharistic Congress. He spent a period of his youth with the Irish Christian Brothers, but he had to leave, unfortunately, due to delicate health. You know, the same story is true of Venerable Edel Quinn. She joined the Poor Clares, but poor health again prevented her from reaching or taking vows as a religious. And yet these two marvellous souls, they found their vocation in the Legion of Mary in spades. I mean, they excelled when they joined the Legion. So in his late teens, the servant of God, Alfie Lamb, he found his vocation in the Legion of Mary, and he soon became involved in extension teams, introducing the Legion throughout Ireland. So he went around the country promoting and developing and building up the Legion. Fine young man. The pictures of him are lovely, actually. He must have been a great character. But in 1953, at the quite young age of 21, he was appointed as an envoy of the Legion of Mary to South America. And for almost 6 years, he worked tirelessly, traveling through every country in South America to promote the Legion. He landed in Ecuador and did an awful work in Argentina. He's buried in Argentina and Brazil. And he had rapid command of languages and was even working among the Orthodox, many Russians who were living in Latin America, and set himself the task of learning Russian with a view to going to Russia as well. That was his ambition. But he died sadly very prematurely with cancer. So during his time there from 1953 through to 1959, he set up a great number of branches of the Legion and trained a multitude in its apostolate. His devotion to Mary was outstanding, and he'd been blessed with the great natural gifts of a personality and infectious enthusiasm that attracted souls to the service and love of God. And after a short illness, sadly, he died on the feast of St. Agnes. Excuse me, the throat is not doing good today. On the 21st of January 1959. So a wonderful saint. So a Mass in his honour at the Church of the Three Patrons in Rathgar on Sunday at 12:15. The anniversary Mass then for Frank Duff coming up as well. That's always in the Pro Cathedral here in Dublin. That'll be on Saturday the 20th of November at 3 p.m. And Most Reverend Dr. Tom Deenan, Bishop of Meath, will be the celebrant and homilist there too. So great stuff for the centenary of the Legion. Now I'll pause there, just give myself a chance to just clear my throat there and take a small breather. And thank you indeed for accompanying us here. We have a little piece of music lined up, and please do text us 089 467 2000. Email us info@radiomaria.ie and give a call on the landline right now 014-123456 and drop us a comment or a like or all these things on social media. We would be glad to hear from you. Now Voces 8, we have lined up beautiful choir again. Tara has chosen a nice piece of music by Maurice Lauridsen. O Magnum Mysterium, O Great Mystery. Back after this.
There's about 30 seconds left, Father, and then I'll just stick on a quick jingle.
Hello, I'm Mary Beckery from Limerick, and I listen to Radio Maria every day and a lot of parts of the night, and it has been the greatest source of help to me. So I'd encourage any one of you that are just being on their own as I am, and to just donate, because you can't do better for yourself. And it has really brought me through the virus. So God bless you all.
There you are, Mary Berkery. Nice. She came to visit there with her daughter some time ago. And nice to listen back to that. Mary's still in touch with us. She loves to listen in still. So if you're listening, Mary, this morning, shout out to you. Thanks, William. And thanks to Tara, that lovely piece of music there on Magnum Mysterium, oh great mystery. I needed that little pause to give my voice a small bit of a time out. Interesting, 18 was in touch there. She was listening to a repeat show last night and figured I was coming down with something. So she's a prophet and she doesn't know it, because that was before I went off sick the last few days of last week. So yes, got to mind the little voice here as well. Kathy was just in touch there on Facebook. Thanks for that, Kathy. Manuka honey, if you saw the shelf of medication that very kind listeners have sent in to me here, and I've been sent in Manuka honey too as well. It's very expensive, very expensive. Don't even dream of sending me any more. I have plenty to be going on with. Thank you. Yeah, and I have strepsils are my port of call these days, just to keep the lubrication going there, that the vocal cords are not under too much stress. Now, can I share with you a nice little bit of news here? I have them in front of me here in my hands that I got last night. The Legion of Mary, the Concilium, has republished many of Frank Duff's articles in 6 new books, and they've done a lovely job on it, I must say, in bringing them all together. A nice sort of sizable proportion, 200 or 300 pages in each one. A nice big print, which is, I think, a very wise idea and thought. It's very readable. And Frank's articles are no more than each chapter, 20 chapters in each, and each one is no more than about 10 pages, I suppose, of each one, let's say, give or take. But Frank's genius there is there, and I'm just so pleased that all of these have finally been republished together in book form. And the titles are taken from the previous titles of his books. In their earlier incarnation, they were a little bit all over the place, and there's a bit of overlap between some of those books. So what they have very wisely done is simply brought them all together now and put them in 6 separate titles. There was overlapping, as I say, in some of the same titles that were used of old, but there was overlapping, so it's just much tidier now and presented so well. So the titles are very telling. Victory Through Mary, final book, and the images on the front are lovely. These are an artist, Gerald O'Byrne, who I believe is the same artist who painted the Tessera image of the Legion of Mary as well. Great legionary, and just a lot of thought and great interest, and just nice, simple, but nicely presented in his artwork, very colourful as well. So the Victory to Mary, the Woman of Genesis, if I can hold that up to the camera, it has a lovely image there on it of Our Lady with her sleeves rolled up and her apron on her, and a basket of grain that she's feeding to the hens. Why? Because one of the titles, the Lord is in the background there too, one of the titles in the Frank Duff's collection there is that Mary kept hens at Nazareth. He goes in for that. He goes in for very catchy and very appealing titles, to not just by way of what do we call it nowadays, clickbait, but just his idea was to write and approach topics just a little bit differently from all the other great spiritual writers. As you know, he was a voracious reader himself and had a huge library of immense collection of books on spiritual matters. but had his own, put his own spin on things. And the genesis of each of these articles is usually a talk. He'd be commissioned to give a talk at one of the Legion gatherings, and he would write out a script and he would deliver it, and we have many of them actually in audio form, and they're quite difficult. His delivery isn't the most easy to listen to. We've played little segments of him. So I have some of those, but they wouldn't make for the best of radio. I should just pull out a few little segments and maybe share them with you and do a commentary with them. But from the audio production then, he would sit down and redraft it, and it would become an article for the Legion quarterly magazine. And then out of the quarterly magazines, they were all assimilated and brought together in book form through the 1950s and the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, they would have all been produced and put together then. And the last collection would have been published posthumously after he died in 1980. But now it's great, they put them all together. So Victory Through Mary, The Woman of Genesis, The Spirit of the Legion of Mary, another collection, Mary Shall Reign, which is probably one of the more popular, more familiar ones of the latter end of his publishing days. When that was published, gorgeous painting. That's one of my favourites, with the Legion patrons in front. It's just a really lovely image. Virgo Predicanda, meaning the Virgin must be preached, or it's one of her titles in the Litany of Loreto. Again, another lovely image, Gerald O'Byrne. Just really tastefully done. And the last one, Walking with Mary. So they're all previous titles of collections of his, but the difference now, as I say, is there isn't overlap, there isn't any sense of sort of untidiness about them. They're just so nicely bound and put together. And just to give you a little sample, and what they've done, and typical of the Legion of Mary, they have no interest in making profit on these things. It's not about profit, it's about the faith. I just love that sense of, look, if freely we've given, freely we've received. Somebody actually sent in a message a little while ago, a quotation apparently from Pablo Picasso, that our task in life is to find our gift. Let me quote it properly for you, because I'll make a mess of it. And if Frank Dove ever found his gift, where's it gone? Here it is. Yeah, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Give it away. And so that's what the Legion are seeking to do there. So I don't have these, I just have one copy of these. These books are available through the Legion of Mary headquarters. They'll be delighted to hear from you. The Concilium in Dublin. And just look them up online, very easy to find. But it's just €7 for each book. And these are a must for every spiritual library, I have to say. So what I'll do, and I've been promising this all along, is to share with you some of Frank Duff's wisdom from these great books. So just a few of the titles, just by way of a sample of these short little chapters. And it's nice they're short chapters. You can kind of sit and read one in 20 minutes or half an hour, and to be your spiritual reading for the day. So the first one here, I'm going to give you a bit of this, the human mind. And you'll have heard me use this before. I use some of his bits and pieces. The third chapter, hell. Okay, I have to sit and read that one again and tell you what's in there. Upgrading the Legion work. So he has some very insightful things to say about critics of the Legion Apostolate. And when you hear the word Legion, I often say this, just substitute the word Catholic. Because that's what the Legion of Mary seeks to do, is to be full on Catholicism. That's a nice chapter, this one. We Must Know Edel Quinn. Maybe that'll be a nice one to share with you as well. Another one, the Petrine text about St. Peter. The Holy Shroud. Interesting what Frank would have uncovered about that. Islam's New Look. Isn't that interesting, that title? That kind of grabs and arrests you a little bit. And what's he getting at there? The nun's role in the mystical body, the role of religious. So, he's thought these things through. He's considered them at length, and so that between them all, there's about 20 chapters in each of these, and there's 6 of them there. So there's about 120 of his articles, and that would be the real core of his writings. But it's not all of them. It's not all of them, because there would be another. I suppose 20 or so, maybe more, articles that he would have published in the magazine, which were serialized and ended up in the book that we've read and which is available as a podcast here on Radio Maria's website, Miracles on Tap. Fabulous story of the conversion of the red light district in Monto. That could be added to this collection of books too. And as I was telling him at the Legion meeting last night, don't forget Can We Be Saints, his very first article, which stands on its own, and add to that, to the pile of books, the Legion of Mary Handbook, which is an extraordinary document really, and you could canonize him for that alone, whatever, about these 6 books here. But the human mind, just to give you the back paragraph, because it just kind of gets you going. He says, I'm going to discuss with you that inscrutable mystery, the human mind. It is the topic of the day. Psychiatrists swarm like flies, and apparently everyone without exception is a subject for their care. The mind, how we delve into the mind. By reason of all the attention which the mind has been receiving for a long time past, one would imagine that it should have yielded up its secrets, and that by now it would have been brought to a great state of perfection. That's a very, you see what I mean, coming at it from an angle. You would have thought, for all we know about artificial intelligence and about the human brain and the human mind, that by now, finally, we would have figured it out. And you know what it is, we're only using a fraction of our mind, and that you from time to time come across these extraordinary geniuses who are using other parts of but their personalities sometimes suffer as a result. How do you get that balance? What's missing? How is it that, what an extraordinary instrument the human mind is. So he kind of gets you going, doesn't he? He's that style. So he says, yet I do not think that there is justification for the common belief that the brain has become a more subtle instrument than it used to be, and that the ancients were less able thinkers than the moderns. Interesting idea. We have this notion that we're progressing onwards and inexorably and evolving into some super, humans. And Frank says, well, no, don't really think so. He says, read the very oldest classics. So Homer and, some of these great Greek and Roman topics there. And read the very oldest classics, and you must be convinced that the essential thought power in them, as apart from the gloss, which more advanced knowledge would have added in, is just as intense as it would be today. Great point. Because look at some of these classic writers, Shakespeare, go back to Jane Austen, what other great writers, Chesterton, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, they're kind of, we've heard of those names today, but terrific writers, extraordinary. And can we see that we've developed or moved on, or have we got a bit dumber? Some would argue that we've really dumbed things down a lot nowadays. We're just not tapping into the reservoir of the human mind. And we certainly haven't exhausted the human mind by any means. So Frank goes on in this topic, and this particular chapter, it's the first chapter of Victories from Mary here. Why is it we have this mental feebleness? Why is it that so much of the brain remains unused and untapped? Where does original sin fit into this picture? And then he concludes with my favourite bit, or one of my favourite bits, the perfection then of Mary's mind. That if she didn't suffer from the disintegration of sin and the darkness of the intellect, if she did indeed preserve its full powers, does it not suggest to us that she had 100% of the use of her mind? And when she pondered over these things in her heart, surely she had sort of full potency of the gift of humanity, that she never needed to learn anything because once was enough to retain it. And everything would have affected her so deeply and so profoundly and with such great circumspection and vision. And she must have been the most extraordinary, we call it genius, but far, far more than that. She would have had an unparalleled comprehension and an unfailing memory. Mighty stuff from Frank Duff, just little sample for you. I'll share more with you in the days ahead. My time has gone from me. Thanks for your company. Lovely to have you with us. And sorry about the choking a bit earlier. We'll be all good to go as time goes on, please God. So please stay with us. We'll pause now for our Angelus